Sup, freaks? It's your boy Marty here to introduce this episode of Tales from the Crypt. I had the immense pleasure of sitting back down with Fabian Jahr, Bitcoin Core contributor, reviewer extraordinaire, and somebody who has been working on the RPC call that has gotten a lot of attention recently as Bitcoin users have been attempting successfully to audit the supply of Bitcoin. Gotta say it right now. I know you freaks are waiting on the live BitBlock Boom episode that we recorded in Dallas over the weekend. Incredible event, incredible time. Great to be together with Bitcoiners in person. It was a special event, a special weekend. Vibes were high. Of course, I plan on posting that rabbit hole recap. I'm just waiting on the audio. All right, this isn't a me problem. This is an audio file problem. Literally has not been sent to me yet, so I cannot upload the episode. Patience is key. Lower your time preference. Maybe this rabbit hole recap drops after the rabbit hole recap that Matt and I record on Thursday. I hope not, but it may. Back to the episode at hand right now. My discussion with Fabian. I think you guys are really going to like it. Pay attention to what he's saying about reviewing and the review to PR ratio for developers. This is something that Bitcoin users, but more importantly, developers should probably pay attention to and take into consideration. Review is extremely important. This episode is brought to you by our good friends at the motherfucking Cash App. You freaks should know all about them, but if you don't know about them, let me tell you about them, all right? They're the easiest place to stack sats in the United States. All right, you can stack sats, send sats, receive sats, and sell sats if you so please. You're hearing sats. Why is that? Because sats are the standard, right? We're stacking whole sats. We're not buying fractions of Bitcoin. You can make sats the standard on the Cash App. It's incredible. I saw a product tease earlier today, a little screenshot. I don't know what I saw. I don't know if it was fabricated. Who knows? This is a little speculation. It seems like they may be getting better portfolio tracking tools. I'll leave it there. Speaking of portfolio, if you want to expand your portfolio beyond sats, Cash App is allowing you to invest in slivers of stonks via Cash App investing. If you're into the stonk market, if you're into that game, and you have a favorite stonk, but it's a little too expensive, Cash App investing is allowing you to buy as little as $1 worth of that stonk. Again, stacking slivers of stonks. And because this is all connected to your bank account, there's no 4 to 5 day waiting period. You can start stacking sats and slivers of stonks today. Cash App may even be your bank account, or offering account number and routing number so you can get your paychecks direct deposited into the app. Make sure you know that Cash App Investing is a subsidiary of Square, member SIPC, and as always, when you download the app, if you haven't already, make sure you use the code STACKINGSATS, that's one word, STACKINGSATS. You're going to get $10, and $10 is going to go to our good friends at Owls Lacrosse. That's Owls Lacrosse. Woo! 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 Enjoy this episode with Fabian. And again, be on the lookout for the BitBlock Boom rabbit hole recap. Waiting on that audio. Okay.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy, Marty Bent here. Very excited for this conversation. It's actually almost a year to the date. 364 days if you factor in the leap year that we've had since I posted our first episode. I'm sitting back down with Fabian Jahr. Fabian, what's going on?
I'm doing good. Great to see you again. Unfortunately, not face-to-face like last time. But yeah, so the best we can do right now.
You know what? I'll take it. It's I've been getting used to these remote interviews, but I do prefer them in person. And like we were just saying before we hit record, we're both headed to in-person conferences this weekend. Are you excited for yours? Which one are you going to?
Yeah, I'm going to Bitcoin Week, which is in Frankfurt, which is also pretty close to where I grew up. So that's cool for me on many levels. Like first time since the pandemic that I'm going to a Bitcoin event, like a bigger Bitcoin event. This is like yeah, it's like the name says, it's a week that is about with several Bitcoin events. The main event is the Unchained convention, which is an event that used to be a bit less Bitcoin focused, but now they are putting it more into a Bitcoin focus. Yeah, there are different events over that week, and tomorrow, as one of the first events, I'm going to do a Bitcoin Socratic seminar there as well. I think they don't have a regular one in Frankfurt, and I've been doing this in Berlin, and yeah, I just like to organize these wherever I go, if I get the chance, and so I'm going to contribute to the Bitcoin Week.
Hell yeah! The more Socratic events, the better. What's it been like running a Socratic event in Berlin?
Very good. I mean, obviously the crowd is not as big as in New York, but yeah, we have a pretty solid group of people that come together. Several people that are very knowledgeable. It's fun to discuss stuff with. I would say we are going into the 11th edition now, I think. So the first 5 or 6 were in person. Then the pandemic came, and we just kept on going with the same date, but online. And it has been going well. I was a little bit surprised because although we call it like the Berlin Socratic online, the crowd has changed a bit. So I think we're about the same size as face to face, but just a couple of people that would show up face to face are not showing up face to face. And but then we have people from some all over Europe, but also some from general German Bitcoin scene that just tune in and participate. And that's cool to also introduce the Socratic seminar to these people. And we're in contact also with other Socratic style events that are going on now online, like Sydney, London. Yeah, so that's very cool to keep this community going with these events.
Hell yeah! Thank you for organizing that. The more information propagation, the better. And they're fun too. It's been interesting seeing the transition to these virtual meetups. The VR ones look very, very cool. I haven't participated yet because I don't have a VR set, but that seems like a cool little medium to do a remote meetup. Have you ever done this?
No, unfortunately not. I mean, as probably everyone at the start of the pandemic, I was thinking about buying a VR headset, but I just didn't end up doing it because I thought like I buy too much tech stuff that I don't really end up using, and yeah, so and I have watched some recordings of some events. So definitely the quality of the content is awesome, and I think it's great to organize that. But just for me, this VR experience is I just haven't gotten into that. But yeah, I think that like what's great is also that these events have like a spectrum. They vary quite a bit from event to event. So like what we try to do is still, I would say, pretty much in the spirit of New York and what we do face to face, that we try to keep it as anonymous as possible. So we don't use Zoom, we use Jitsi, which is also software that we self-host. We don't do any recordings. We asked everyone else to not do any recordings. We don't even do transcripts, although that has been proposed sometimes. But yeah, the Berlin Socratic seminar online is hopefully, like, we cannot check everyone, of course, but hopefully as anonymous as you are used to an anonymous event, or maybe even more because you don't have to show your face. But then also, as I said, that there's a spectrum, and others are different in terms of the content, how they organize that, how they're, for example, more focused on specific events, like the London Socratic seminars are very much focused on specific topics, for example, whereas we have like month to month, just like the updates on all the various topics. So yeah, that's fun to see, and I think we get all the events get participants, and people are happy. Like we largely get positive feedback, so yeah, that's great.
Hell yeah. Yeah. So it actually lines up 11 Socratic meetups in Berlin. You I believe when we recorded it was like a day or two before you left New York. And so our first chat, we talked about the RPC college you were working at, the Chaincode residency. You obviously have since moved on from that residency, and you had a grant from OKCoin to focus on Bitcoin, Bitcoin Core, and obviously most recently you've been popping up on my feed, and I've been seeing conversations between you and Pierre Richard and GitHub about the whole validating the supply at any given point in time. But before we get to that, just what's your year been like? And what I really am interested to learn is, and I've talked to other developers who have received grants, but I haven't really dove into the mechanics of what that's like and how like how you use the grant. You just use, like, so if you're comfortable explaining that, I'd love to dive into that.
Yeah. I mean, like, that the information is not mostly not really talked about public, but it's also not secret, I think. So I just tell you what I think is interesting to share. So I mean, first of all, it's very important to kind of give the context from what the word looked like a year ago and what it looks like now, because it feels like changed dramatically in terms of how many grants are out there. When we ended the residency about a year ago, for some of us there was a path forward and some funding available, basically, but for some of us it wasn't. That, for example, for me, meant also to kind of bridge myself a little bit with just doing freelance work like I used to while working on Bitcoin Core as well. And then the talks with OKCoin started somewhere at the beginning of winter, and for OKCoin this was also the first time that they actually gave out a grant, so it was also some learning involved for them as well. And they received support from Chaincode, but also I think talk to other people that had been involved with grants, and so but it was a bit of a there was a bit of a preparation period that was just necessary for them to kind of get into it. And then by the end of December, pretty much beginning of this year, that's when the grant really started. So I think around Christmas basically was a great Christmas gift. Yeah, so that's when it started for me. There's basically there's a very basic contract and like a total sum, but that gets paid out over a monthly period or on a monthly basis, basically over the agreed period of time. And there was just very loose some agreement of how we keep in touch. But since OKCoin, I felt like in our first talks was very interested in learning from this process in general. We have, I would say, kept in pretty close touch and basically emailing at least on a weekly basis about what I've been working on, but also had several calls. I have written some blog posts that was released on their blog as well. I think we have recorded 3 podcasts as well. So OKCoin has podcasts themselves, and recorded some episodes for that on various topics. But for the most part, over this period of time, I was just working on Bitcoin and giving updates to OKCoin. And then beginning of this year, or as the year, as the months went on, it feels like many more grants were given out. And I have heard from some people how maybe there are minor differences in how that process works. I think BitMEX is pretty public about how their process works. You can read quite a bit on their blog about that works for them. And of course, Square is public on Twitter. So yeah, that's these grants might differ in details, but I think overall it's kind of a similar experience to most developers that once basically the setup is through, for the most part you just focus on doing your open source work and contributing to Bitcoin. And in some cases this involves like a focus of what to work on, and in some cases it's more free. But I think basically, I don't really know of any people that have really had a bad experience or so where there was like strings attached or so. I think everything is public. People are having good experiences right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, 2020, the year of Bitcoin dev grants, it seems, and
exactly.
Hopefully there's more to come.
Yeah.
And so, what did you focus on this year? Particularly, I know we'll talk about the validation of the supply, but I'm sure you've been working on other stuff outside of that as well.
Yeah, aside from that, not really a topical, very deep focus. Other than that, I was mainly focusing on doing reviews, but not also in a specific area, but more wide, and just on the one hand trying to be helpful wherever I can, like where I saw interesting tickets where there were lacking reviewers, but also just trying to learn more of the code base and trying to learn more about the protocol, basically. So a win-win, both hopefully for the code, but also for me, that I could see different parts of the code base and get into more stuff, learn more, but also help get stuff merged. Yeah, I think that's something that is just worth stressing, that reviewing is really important, and it's a common bottleneck in Bitcoin Core contribution. We have, I don't know, something over 300 open pull requests, and oftentimes these can be there for months or years. And so, yeah, that's something where I just saw in general a need where I could help out, and that's what I did.
Yeah, no, that's a topic of discussion that's been arising, considering the amount of grants that have been going out to devs. How do you weigh the funding of new code that's written versus code that has already been written and needs to be reviewed? Like, are you just creating more tech debt as you fund new development, new lines of code, if you will?
Yeah.
To put it. So how do you view that trade-off, and how would you go if you had a magic wand or an endless pit of money and we're able to fund different parts of either code review or code development? How would you go about it?
I mean, I also had this discussion with OKCoin recently, where they asked me of my opinion, and they specifically asked me about this rule of like one pull request, for one pull request you should something review like 5 to 15 other pull requests, and of course there's a lot of detail to that. Like, one review does not equal another review, but I think this can be looked at as a good rule of thumb. And kind of what I would really love to see is that just everyone who wants to write code also just review code, because that's just a win-win, because people learn from it, and it just makes a lot of sense to just not distinguish between people that mostly write code and people that mostly review. I think ideally people should just do both, or at least strive to do both. I know some people are not as experienced and they don't feel comfortable maybe giving a full UG when they just start out, and but then they should just work on that.
Yeah, it's got to be intimidating attempting to give your first full ACK in the Bitcoin repository. And for you freaks who are unaware, a full ACK is basically the acknowledgement that you agree that that's suitable code to be merged, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And I think like the discussion on Twitter on that, I mean, I only saw a little bit on that, but I think is because Bitcoin Magazine gave out like a bounty for get your first pull request merged, and they gave something like $500 in Bitcoin, promised that for your first commit. And so it's obviously a incentive for new developers to come in and write some code and try to get it merged. But I think the first person to point this out that there's a downside to this was Neha. And she said that, and I agree with that, of course, is that it's great that newcomers want to contribute code, but it just puts more load on the experienced developers because they are the ones who have to review this. And of course, so the first-time contributor, oftentimes they have to learn a lot, not just about the Bitcoin code base, oftentimes also just C++ and how to use Git and GitHub. So there's on many levels, oftentimes there's support needed. And as I said, reviewing is a very scarce resource. And so the incentive should be aligned there. But it's also hard. Like it's much harder to incentivize to do the right incentives to do reviews, because it's the quality of review is very hard to judge. There's for example concept ACK, which is just conceptual review, which can be just not even looking at the code, but just reading the text of what is suggested for the change, and that can be for some experienced reviewers that can be a couple of seconds basically, because it's a no-brainer to them. But also there can be very detailed thoughts on that, if what a concept. And there can be weeks and months of discussions just on a conceptual review. So just on that, the first stage of review, basically, it's very hard to say, okay, it's worth to pay somebody for that or not to pay somebody for that. It's just basically you run into then issue where if you were to judge the review, or if it's worthy to get a bounty, like you would have to review reviews, and then you would have even more work. So yeah, it's very hard to kind of structure that in the right way.
Yeah, QA process for reviewing seems like something that would be hard to implement.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm not a developer at all, so correct me if this inclination of mine is wrong, but I think what John Newberry is doing with the PR Review Club for people who want to get exposed to the Bitcoin Core repository and sort of learn the ways of how to interact with the people working on Bitcoin Core, not the people working, just how to understand the code base better. I think that's conceptually, to me, it's a great first step, and similar to how the Socratic meetups have been multiplying around the world, maybe we need more of those PR review clubs to pop up as well.
Yeah. I think, this is like the best thing that has happened to Bitcoin reviews, basically, because usually, I mean, you're basically alone and you're looking at the code and there's always, is there something that I'm missing? But there you are in a group, you kind of get an insight into how other people look at the code. You even have basically in preparation a guideline of what to look for, because you have some questions on it. You can ask questions yourself. This is really great, great thing. And I would encourage anyone, even if you're not a developer, even if you feel like this is too far out for you, just to either go to the website, I think it's bitcoincore.reviews, and just read the transcripts. Like there's just the discussion from IRC there that you can read on past pull requests, and it's been going on for over a year, so there's a ton of stuff to read there. Or just to jump in and just maybe just watch the conversation for a couple of times. I think there's hardly anything better to learn about contributing to Bitcoin Core, but also just what's going on in the Bitcoin Core code base in general.
Yeah. And so, a couple questions here. Like, how do you prioritize what to review personally? Is it more people reaching out to you like, hey, will you review this for me? Or are you just looking at PRs that have been sitting there for a while? And then two, I forget question two, so you can answer that first while I remember my follow-up question to that.
I kind of try to mix it up. So sometimes I get contacted by people, either people that have written a pull request and they ask for a review, sometimes by other people that just have an interest in a certain PR. That happens sometimes, and I'm happy for that. Like it's not overwhelming, so it's fine for me, and happy to do that. And then aside from that, we have a high priority queue basically. So we have a little, I don't know, what's a GitHub board or something, where I think in theory every developer can put one of their pull requests on it, and that's marked as high priority, and that's what people are supposed to look at first. These tend to be more complex, bigger pull requests. I try to review these, but I cannot always review all of them because some of them just very large, and if it's not my wheelhouse, I just put my focus elsewhere. But in general, I usually have reviewed maybe like half or so of the high priority pull requests that are on that board. Then there are some pull requests maybe that are interesting because they are close to getting merged. So if something already has a couple of UCs and somebody asks in general, or it looks like this could be merged, just needs a couple more eyes on it, then that's something where I might jump in because of that in order to get it across the finish line. But there are also things that just pop up to me because they're just very new. And then that would be more like a conceptual review, or also sometimes I just find stuff that has been around for a while and just got stuck for some time. Something that is also important to understand is that actually a large part of the review can also happen after the first review. That's also part of the complexity of judging basically how good is the review, and if that kind of formula, like one pull request versus 5 to 15 reviews, if that holds up, you also have to stick with a review basically, because usually what happens is pull request gets put out there and a couple of reviews come in, and then some changes get made. And this can go on also for many times, over months, sometimes years. And sometimes in between, this gets stuck for 1 or 2 months. And ideally, you have to come back to this pull request that you have started reviewing and where they will make changes. And then you have to re-review. And you have to say if now everything is addressed for you, or maybe if you want further changes, and then you have to give a re-UC. And this can be also a bit annoying at times when you think, okay, this is done for me now, I'm happy with this, and then somebody else has a small comment and it gets changed, and then you have to come back and re-review it again. But it's important because you always have to have the acknowledgements on the latest state of the pull request, and that sometimes it's overwhelming. Like sometimes it happens that 3 or 4 pull requests that I have been reviewed, and they like come in the updates that they have all been changed, and then it's like, it's a queue and you have to work on these. And one good example of one where I've put in a bit more of my review time is Signet. I'm not sure if you have had a specific episode on Signet.
Not yet.
Yeah. So Signet, just very briefly, is a new type of testnet. It differs in the utility in the sense that testnet has some problems that basically miners can come in there and just mine tons of blocks by maybe they want to test the newest ASIC or so, and that means everything kind of gets screwed up if you want to do some normal tests, right? If you want to, for example, run a Lightning network on top of the testnet, that is not possible because sometimes you get 1,000 blocks in an hour or so, and then the basic security mechanisms of Lightning just don't work in the same way. That's why there has been for many years there's been people have wanted a more stable sort of testnet, and developer Kalle, he has suggested Signet probably, I would say, 2 years ago or so, when he first suggested it. And the way this functions, there's still a small proof of work component, but mostly the blocks are validated through a signature. There's a block provider. It's a trusted setup basically. Like there's one person that has that can sign these blocks, and but I mean that doesn't really matter. Otherwise, it functions like a Bitcoin network, and you can join it. You can validate blocks as well, and you can then have a testnet that has very stable blocks in the sense that the block comes every roughly 10 minutes forever. And that helps with testing these like different layers, for example.
That seems like a very high priority if we're going to flesh out the Lightning Network in full. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, there's been like 4 testnets, right? There's been more than one. Or are we on the second? For some reason, I have a multiple 2 in my head.
There's a testnet 3.
3. People are talking about testnet 4 already.
Yeah.
Signet may be. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, testnet 4 would probably be a reset of the normal testnet, but I mean, I'm not sure if that's necessary. I haven't really seen a discussion. And there's also, of course, regtest, which is just for your local testing, where you have 100% control, but you cannot really set up an actual network of other participants with it.
It's Fabian, it's crazy. These small, I mean, I want to call it a small detail, but probably a detail that goes unnoticed or most Bitcoiners outside of developers don't think about is like the testnet. Like you need to be able to test all this stuff and it needs to be workable. And then on top of that, you need to review the testnet as well as the other code.
Yeah.
There's so many layers to all this. And I think, again, so the crux of what we're getting at in this episode is the importance of review and then dev funding for that review as well. And so I think I remember my follow-up question to the initial question, which was like just to drive home to the listeners out there, to the freaks, the importance of reviews. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any examples in your mind of instances in which reviewing really highlighted a potential problem that may have gotten merged or led to a discovery that was integral to a piece of code that's in the code base right now?
You mean like something that was caught in review, or maybe that wasn't caught?
Yeah.
I mean,
either or. Or maybe it's a bad question. You can tell me if it's a bad question.
Yeah. I mean, the maintainers generally don't merge anything that is not reviewed enough. I think a better what's better to mention maybe as the problem is then that stuff just gets stuck and doesn't really it just gets stuck because there's nobody reviewing it, and that sometimes means that really good new stuff can get stuck, and so there just pretty recently there was a small contribution also from Kalle, where this is about basically you can it's hard to explain. I didn't look at it for a little bit, but it was a small wallet contribution that basically tested an alternate way of spending your or funding your transaction by not re-reviewing or trying to sweep some of your addresses. So a small improvement on privacy potentially if you have reuse addresses in the past. And this to me was almost a no-brainer conceptually. And I think Peter Willer and Greg Maxwell and so on, I think they also gave concept acts. But this had been opened in 2018. And I had never seen this. Like I wasn't contributing to Bitcoin Core in 2018. And somehow John Attack, he found this. And he tagged me in it and said, "Do you think this is interesting?" And then I said, "Oh, this is interesting." And then I did a review, and John also did a review. And I think then it took, I don't know, a month or so to get it merged. But essentially it had been lying there for about 2 years without anything happening to it. And I think actually, I think the way John found it is because Kalle wanted to close it, because he said, okay, apparently there's not enough interest in this. So I'm going to close it. So that can show that for some people, it's just frustrating if they have a good contribution, but it feels like nobody's reviewing it. It's a bit of type of personality. Like some people reach out to other people to hey, can you please review this? But not everyone likes to do this. And so this is a good example of something that gets stuck because there weren't enough reviewers. Maybe just something that was a particular part of the code base where there wasn't focus on it for some time. But when there's attention to it, basically just a couple of people need to get together and review it and re-review the changes. And then something like that is pretty valuable can get merged rather quickly. That makes sense.
Yeah, so these PRs can basically gather dust and sit around, and unless developers communicate with each other, like, hey, look at this, that could have been just brushed away.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
and Kalle is like no blame on Kalle in any way, because I mean he was also, I think, putting out Signet at the same time, and he was probably very busy with Signet, and also going forward for up until now, and he put this out as well. Probably he thought this is kind of a no-brainer. It's a small change. There shouldn't be an issue with this. Like, it should get reviewed, and there was a little bit of conceptual review, but then just kind of got lost. I mean, there's also a bit of a problem with all these many open pull requests, right? Like when you come into the repository and you look at the open pull request, there's a list of 300 to 400 open pull requests. And it's just sorted from with the latest, because also it depends on, I mean, you want to review something that has been kept up to date, not something that is rebase issues or something like that. So you probably start at the top and look at the most recent ones. And once something has kind of fallen below a certain threshold, like there's nothing been happening for like 3 or 4 months, really somebody needs to get in there and like push it again, like kind of tag somebody in it and maybe message somebody about it, like, hey, what about this? Are you still working on this? And maybe poke people to do reviews.
Yeah. And it's crazy thinking about the open source nature that, like, there's nobody. I mean, obviously people are organizing and reaching out to others, but there's no central sort of somebody saying, hey, make sure somebody's paying attention to this. It's fascinating to me that it's dependent on driven individuals to drive this attention to detail when it comes to reviewing.
Yeah. I mean, of course.
In my mind,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, in my mind, I'm thinking, like, what is there? I mean, obviously, you have the pressing PRs that need reviews that you described earlier. Like, is there, like, Pierre had that BitcoinAxe.com site,
mm-hmm.
which visualized all the PRs out there. But I'm just trying to think, like, is there something outside of GitHub, or is there a process that could be instituted to drive better reviewing tendencies? You would know better than I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's it's funny. Like I have thought about this for a little bit, but it's also one of these weird problems that are very hard to solve. Like I've thought about like funny ideas, something like a PR Tinder or something like that. You know, essentially you want to get like random suggestions. Right?
PR Tinder. I like that. I like that.
Because yeah, I mean, Bitcoin Access is great because it also provides you more information that is relevant. Like GitHub is not written for Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Access basically GitHub for Bitcoin Core in the overview of that it provides for these pull requests. But still, it's still like you can sort it in different ways, but it's still a long list of 300 plus pull requests, and you're usually going to start with the high priority ones, which are like 10 or so, and then there's a ton of other stuff. And I just want to say like the like serious bugs or these big features like Signet or so, they usually don't fall by the wayside. Usually there's somebody always to kind of pick them up, but something that is a bit less maybe that is lacking an additional champion, basically, aside from the person that wrote the code, like that can just fall into a crack or so and get overlooked. And for like essentially something like a PR Tinder, where you would get suggested like these pull requests that have been there for a couple of months and could use somebody, or maybe they should just get closed because they're just not, there's not enough attention to it. But that is a hard decision. I mean, you cannot, like, I cannot go into something and say, I don't think this is interesting enough. Maybe you just close it because there might be somebody else who thinks otherwise, right? So that also means why this list is growing, because we're very hesitant, or I think closing something should always come from the person who is contributing the code, but often they also forget maybe to do that, or they don't want to because they think it's valuable.
Yeah. So, are there any like low-hanging fruit on this list of PRs that could be sort of closed due to the fact that code has been merged that makes them obsolete?
Again, like somebody would have to go through and look at that and judge that, and there's just a ton of work. I think some developers did that a couple of months ago. Like they did some cleanup. Like the list used to be quite a bit longer. And somebody also sent me one old pull request that I took a look at, and that was a good example of something where it just this is just factually stuck because it's an upstream issue basically, and we just have to wait for that software that we're using for the RPC and HTTP REST interface to fix this small bug. And then we can fix it also ourselves. But this is something where we just have to wait. So this was actually something where we couldn't really do anything. Like it didn't make sense to change this or to close it. It just had to stay there. But other than that, yeah, it's just work that needs to be put in. And there we're back to kind of the original topic. This is just similar to reviews, just a similar type of work. Somebody ideally would be regularly going through this backlog and kind of check, okay, was this closed now, or maybe there is not enough interest and this can be closed. Yeah.
So in your opinion, how has the state of reviewing changed the past year? You think people are reviewing more, reviewing less? It's getting better. Like, do you think we still need more? But do you think momentum's going in the right direction? I guess that's the question I'm trying to get at there.
It's hard to say. In a sense, a year ago, I wasn't as experienced, so I can't really judge my impression from a year ago to today's impression because I just had way less of an overview. But at the time, it didn't feel as much of a problem to me. It just became more apparent over time as I was doing more. A year ago, I think I was just not involved enough to see how much of a problem it was on a day-to-day basis, basically. And like very recently, it just feels more and more like there's just not enough. I can really. It feels like there was a noticeable dip when the pandemic hit, and I think that's pretty easy to say because people just had other stuff to deal with, and so I think that just showed that there was not there's reviewing slowed down. Since then, it has picked up more, and I think it's at a normal level now, just normal, not enough normal, I would say. But what I've also seen more is like first-time contributors coming in. Like that feels from the beginning of the year to now. I think there's been some reach out, which is great. Some new contributors have come in and tried to do their first commit. Maybe because of the Bitcoin Magazine thing, maybe because of other stuff, and that's cool. But that just shows also that this binds reviewing resources, and then on the other hand, we have stuff that is very big and important and takes quite a bit of time, like Signet, for example, where it would be greater if we had more resources on it.
Any of you freaks that are able to review, get on it. Bitcoin depends on you.
Yeah.
Because talking about the list of PRs, like you don't want it to get too long, because then you get decision paralysis. I mean, there probably already is a degree of decision paralysis on what to review and what not to review. But if you imagine the list getting longer, especially to Niha's point, if first time PRs, people making PRs for the first time are jumping in, demanding the attention of reviewers who'd be working on more pertinent PRs. Yeah, it's like a weird balancing act, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just, I don't feel like there's a right answer to this. The only thing I think should be noted is that there, like Mia said, there should not just be incentive or the goal for new contributors shouldn't just be get your first commit in, but it should also be get your first reviews in. And Bitcoin Core Review Club is great resources to get into that, but I think I mentioned in some casual discussion, maybe there's like a good first review label. Like right now we have a good first contribution label for issues that are open specifically for beginners, where it's something that you can do pretty easily. And so this is kind of reserved, like contributors that have already gotten things merged, like me, for example, would not take this issue and do it because it's reserved for first-time contributors. And then maybe we could also have a label for something to review that is pretty easy to review. But I think I don't know. I don't remember who I mentioned this to, and I don't know if it's if people would be interested in it, because it also again means kind of judging: is this a good review? Is it an easy review? Is it not an easy review? Yeah, but it's maybe one idea.
No, I like that a lot. Just because personally, one of my favorite follows on my Bitcoin list is Bitcoin merges, and I especially like the tweets that come out from Bitcoin merges where it's like, hey, this is the first merge from blah blah blah, and it has like the little party emoji, whatever. And I always like feel I'm like, hey, I'm proud of that person. I'm like, hey, congrats on your first PR, first review. If you get that dopamine hit with that as well, it could incentivize it.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea. You got two really good ideas. Review Tinder and first good review badge or acknowledgement, if you will.
Yeah, so like one thing also where that just came to my mind again is where this shows that people just have issues with giving reviews initially is that often when we have the Bitcoin Core Review Club, there are people there that are participating and that are reviewing, that are doing really good in the discussion, like contributing good questions, answering questions, showing that they actually have really understood how the stuff works. Maybe they even find something. But then I don't find them in the actual pull request giving an UG. Yeah, that's kind of sad, I think. Like, I don't really know. I don't, you can't force somebody to do that. But it would be great if like a higher percentage of people that are participating in the discussion in the peer review club that clearly have understood what it's about also would end up getting themselves to the point to actually give a NUC also then in the pull request.
Yeah, it's probably an intimidation factor. I can't imagine how intimidating it would be for a developer's first, like, again, ACK or whatever. You think a lot of people are just like, I don't want to risk making myself look stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really tell anyone to just fuck it, give an UC or whatever. But I mean, at some point, you, especially if it's not the first time you write code in your life, and you maybe have some professional experience where you also reviewed somebody else's code. Like at some point, you just have to be honest with yourself and say, okay, I don't find any problem with this, so then I guess this is okay, and I can give an UC. Like that's just how it works for everyone. Like nobody is without fault, but that's also the reason why we don't have just a single reviewer on pull requests. We have usually 3 at least, oftentimes more if it's really important stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Damn, man. It's like, it's very interesting speaking with developers. Because like coming to Bitcoin from an economic perspective, which I came into obviously, but this podcast has really exposed me more to the technical side of Bitcoin as well. But to be frank, yeah, I'm focused on sound money, the economics number go up, and it's all initiated and enabled by a group of people somewhat, I don't want to say disorganized, but disparate and self-organizing. That's probably a better term. Like a lot of the work that you guys do is thankless to a degree, and like reviewing, if you're gonna like tier like thankless actions, is probably at the bottom of that, right? It's something that's necessary and vital, but boring and somewhat of a thankless job. It's just ranting here.
Well, but
how did like do you?
That makes it even sweeter if somebody thanks you, like Pierre did recently. Yeah.
What do you mean?
The gettxoutsetinfo stuff and the auditing stuff. Like there was very nice validation of the work that I've been doing. So
right.
Yeah.
It's a good segue into that topic. So what was this whole saga like for you? Seeing everybody run that RPC call and screenshot it, and then the further development of the refinement of nailing down the supply after that.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of came out of left field. Like I had seen this ETH discussion on how it's hard for them to audit their total supply. In general, I mostly ignore discussions on ETH. Just feels like a huge waste of time for me personally. I don't have a good enough understanding of ETH, and I'm just not interested in it. And but yeah, I thought like, well, this is interesting. Like this is just basically a given for Bitcoin. Like this is just part of Bitcoin. Like this being able to audit supply. This is like the the minimum thing of Bitcoin. Like everyone takes this as a given basically, and it's
like it's part of the core of the reason we're all here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just felt crazy that some Ethereum people were basically like, yeah, this is not such a big deal, and it's like, okay, yeah, if it's not such a big deal for you, okay, but then it's just shows again how different Ethereum is from Bitcoin, and it's really different category basically. So I was just following this loosely, like it came up in my Twitter feed as well, but since I mostly don't follow this kind of stuff, only saw a little bit of it, I think. And then initially, I think Pierre posted that he would pay out a bounty of 1 million sats or so for a script that would allow him to audit the total supply of Bitcoin. And that was basically my cue to jump in, because this is really what I've been working on for quite a bit of time. This is the gettxoutsetinfo call and the CoinSets index that I've been working on. We'll go a little bit more into detail about that in a moment, but yeah, there was really like I got it. I saw it, and basically immediately somebody messaged it to me as well. I think John Attack messaged it to me as well, basically instantly. And so yeah, that was fun, and I answered to it, and then I basically did my typical thing where I said, okay, this is great. I will take the sets, but also I need more reviewers basically, because this this work is one of those things that have been out there. There's just not top priority. Like this is not as high priority as Signet or Taproot. There are some people that would like to see this, but yeah, it's just lacking reviewers. But essentially, this was what Pierre was asking for. And so yeah, I just sent him this as a response to the tweet. And he tested out the code. He had some suggestions. Mainly, he would like to have more insight. He wanted to have more insight into kind of the internals of each of the blocks, so he could validate each block individually. So I followed up a day later or so with that addition, and also wrote a few days later an export function where you could export basically content of this index to a CSV file, which is more compatible with typical auditing tools.
So you can do that via Core?
Yeah, I mean, it's
export to CSV,
writing it to a file with comma separated. Yeah, it is a new RPC. I wrote an RPC just for this. I don't really know if that's going to get merged. This is an open pull request now, but it was easy to write. It's like 70 lines or so, and Pierre used that to get out the export. And I think that's what he's been working with now. And I think he's going to also write something about that. I think that he posted that on Twitter. I think he's going to document what he's been doing. And so that's going to be an interesting read as well.
Yeah. It was such a fun saga. Again, going back to the point, like, hey, this is like a core tenet of why we're even working on and investing in and talking about and evangelizing this technology, is the fact that it's transparent and you personally, the individual, can audit it and verify.
Yeah.
Like, are audit and verify synonymous? This is just me going off in my head now. You can verify it. You can audit it. I don't think they're synonymous.
I would say
very
audit
close.
is probably verifying afterwards, I guess, maybe.
Yes. Verifying the verification. But no, I mean, and thankfully because of the work that you're doing, Bitcoiners are easily able to do that. And it's like, again, going back to what started this part of the conversation, like the thankless sort of hours spent writing this without anybody really realizing that not you personally, but like any developer working on any part of the code is working on it. I can't. Yeah, I imagine it's. I don't want to say weird, but like it's like all these assholes on Twitter talking about Bitcoin number go up. Little do they know how much work has gone into making the actual function of the network that allows the token within the network to go up. Like people don't. Again, developers are very underappreciated, I would say. But like to have something like this pop up, like how jacked up did you get? Like when you saw like everybody sharing screenshots of the RPC call you've been working on, and like when people needed it most, like it was just there. It was because you worked on it. Well, and others as well, obviously.
I mean, to be fair, it was there before. Like people could run it before. It just takes a couple of minutes. But what I'm doing is basically democratizing it more. So, like I don't really remember how much we went into the details of this the last time, but maybe as a recap, when you run gettxoutsetinfo right now, it basically processes the whole UTXO set. And that takes, depending on your hardware, a couple of minutes. So if, like many people, for example, you have your own node at home on a Raspberry Pi, I think this takes something like 8 minutes or so on a Raspberry Pi 3. And of course, that on the one hand is kind of annoying that you have to wait this long. But also, if you were to run this, for example, on a regular basis, if you want to have a script that audits the supply on every block, for example, then you run into issues because oftentimes there is you get blocks faster than 8 minutes, right? So sometimes you get 3-4 blocks in 10 minutes, just happens by chance, and then your Raspberry Pi kind of has to catch up, and that's an issue right now. And then going forward, the way it works right now by iterating over the whole UTXO set, this just increases linearly with the size of the UTXO set. So if your Raspberry Pi right now needs 8 minutes to process the UTXO set with every block, then you can easily calculate when we have the next bull run and the UTXO set grows by 20 or 30%, then it's going to take more than 10 minutes, and then you basically cannot do this on a regular basis anymore. Then you, with your Raspberry Pi, you can validate the total supply through gettxoutsetinfo on a regular basis anymore. So yeah, what I've implemented is an index that calculates the content of basically gettxoutsetinfo, so the statistics on the coin supply for each block, for each new block, and can do that ex post for the full blockchain, and then just update these numbers with every new block. And then you have an index that provides you for every block height at your request the data of how many inputs were there being spent and how many outputs were created, what the total values of that is, how much maybe became unspendable in that block, how much the Coinbase reward was, and you can then check these numbers that these are valid in the context. And this is exactly what now Pierre is going to use for the auditing of these numbers, and that you can export with the CSV now with the latest changes.
Yeah. So if blocks are coming in really fast, or conversely, not conversely, but or if just the UTXO set grows by a material amount, 10 to 20%. Is the issue with your Raspberry Pi looking up the CPU? Because that's one thing I noticed. When I ran on my Raspberry Pi, it only took like a minute and a half. Okay. But like if more blocks are coming in, is it just stress on the CPU, just continuously trying to run that and keep up with it?
is it Raspberry Pi 3 or 4?
I think it might be a 4.
Yeah, I think like with the 4, the 4 is much faster, so then you don't have problem for a foreseeable amount of time. But this is really like on the fringes, like people that have been running it on Raspberry Pi 3, that is quite a bit slower, or even some other old hardware. We want to have as many people be able to do that as possible. Raspberry Pi doesn't feel like much money to us, but for some other people it is. So yeah, and for you maybe it's not a huge problem right now, but then it would be a problem if the UTX OSAT grows by 3 or 4 times, which is also possible. If we have 3 or 4 more bull runs, at least, and then so it's a problem that is inevitable on some sort of level, and so why not use it? Because we already have the tools. I'm building on the base index. This is work that has been done previously. I'm just blanking on the name of who built this, but that was built together with the compact block filters, where it makes it much easier to build an index in Bitcoin Core. You have a base class, base index that you can use to build an index. And since that's already there, the amount of code that I had to write for this index and the amount of code that needs to be maintained going forward for this is also in a manageable size. If I would have to build this completely from scratch, this would have been probably 3 or 4 times larger in terms of the size and lines of code. And then it's also a bit of a different build, and it would be much harder to get it merged, to get reviews for it. It would be a higher burden in terms of maintainability as well. And then maybe people wouldn't look at it as favorable as they do right now. So yeah, something else to consider.
So much nuance to all of this. Do you still like writing code for Bitcoin Core and reviewing code?
I
Are
like it
you
more
getting,
than ever.
Yeah? You're not getting burnt out at all?
No. I mean, of course, as with everything, sometimes there are things that are a bit annoying. But all in all, it's the most fun I've ever had working on something, I think. And so, yeah, I like to characterize Bitcoin Core as the most interesting software project ever in the world, basically. That's still the case for me, absolutely. I'm still learning every day. That's important to me. I can see progress. That's also important. Like sometimes it could be a little bit faster, but that's just the nature of it. And I feel like I can be helpful. So that's really all I need.
You've certainly been helpful to me today. So what are you most excited for Bitcoin Core specifically moving forward? Obviously, we have BitTaproot coming up. You talked about Signet earlier. Is there anything you're looking for particularly that gets you all excited?
I mean, these are just like the 2 big things that I've been thinking about mostly. So other than that, there's not really, other than that and my work, of course, there's not really anything that comes very close. Just something that I've been trying to get into a little bit more is the activation of Taproot, actually. There's been quite a bit of conversation on that as well recently. And
that was going to be my next question. How would you activate BIP? What is it, 340, 341, 342?
I keep going back and forth. So I just, rather than making a decision myself, I just try to accumulate more input. Like it feels to me that the discussion that is going on right now is mostly developers being concerned that there's something that they don't know that might be going on from the miner side, basically. And I'm just more thinking about how can or how can we in general kind of get across this gap and not feel so insecure about that something like in case of Segwit is going to happen again. So I don't really have particularly good connections in the mining space. And I think the problem is that many developers don't have them, or if they do, they don't talk about it. But that's just my general impression of the discussion. But I've been trying to improve on that, and I've been reaching out to some people. There's not really something that I can present on that yet, but I hope something is going to come out of that. We talk to some miners and get insights from their side and get more reassured basically from what is going on that side of our ecosystem basically, and then we'll just have a pretty easy answer, I think.
Well, you're talking to somebody who works for a mining company now. It's actually very interesting that you brought this up specifically too, because there's mining's been very opaque in the past. It's probably the most Wild West aspect of this whole industry of the Bitcoin network. From and like speaking with other miners, there's no real contention about BIP Taproot at all, especially when you compare it to Segwit, because Segwit arguably affected not profitability. It affected profitability of mining, and Taproot doesn't do that in the same way that Segwit did. So, with that being said, I'm going to invite you to a call that we have weekly with other miners, and particularly the pools. You need to get pool operators on board, right? Because they're, at the end of the day, until Stratum V2 or Better Hash, but I think Matt is okay with Stratum V2 gets implemented, the pools are going to be the ones signaling for this and whatnot. And so I don't think miners have much pushback on BIP Taproot specifically. Just lost an AirPod. No, that is interesting. And the other thing, so I read the mailing list, the Bitcoin dev mailing list, and so it seems like, at least, so the conversation was started by AJ Towns like last month, and then Matt responded to it from there. It seems like Matt's
Modern Soft Fork activation.
Yeah, I forget if Matt started the conversation.
I think that was Matt's suggestion.
Yeah, but he seems worried of a precedent of like of people just following developers and pushing it through. At least that's what I got from that email. Do you have any thoughts on that, or the conversations are going on around that?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to many people, so take this with a grain of salt. But the feedback that I've gotten to kind of that question, if like taking a defensive and giving it a very long runway, or trying to push it through quickly, kind of to my surprise from the miner side that I've talked to, was the suggestion of somebody who would like to see Taproot, as far as their understanding of it, that it should be rather quickly, because they said they think that you kind of have to rattle people up, do a little bit of marketing around it basically, and then give like a very quick deadline sort of, and they think that would work much better to kind of get like a wave going and then just get it through quickly. But if you would say, okay, we have this now with 1 year deadline, and then maybe another 2 to 3 years until we really do it for sure, then their feedback was that of one person in particular, that this would be too long of a timeline, and then people would kind of dismiss it. So they say, okay, we'll deal with this in 3 years or something.
Yeah, another factor you have to take into consideration is if we do run into a bull market and there is like a lot more adoption, then you just have X amount more people sort of contributing to the conversation. Then you get into a decision paralysis at that point. And if you've ever experienced a Bitcoin bull run in price, you know that even the developers and like it's all anybody can think of as the price. Like everything else gets like pushed to the wayside, which is it's not great, but it's a reality. At least what I've observed in the years that I've been paying attention to Bitcoin. So like right now, I think the timing is perfect to start like we're talking about activation now. I would like activation to start happening, or the signaling for activation to start happening at the network level soon, like before the end of the year. I would like, personally, but who am I? Like that's like the hard question about this whole activation is like who, and that's the it's like who's the first one to step forward, right? Like we have all these potential paths, but who's actually going to take the first step?
And this is also where
do we need a Schadenfreude or something like that?
Sure.
Schadenfreude.
Yeah, I don't know if we maybe yeah. It's a good question. I haven't really thought about that if somebody comes forward, but I think like people are already in the discussion, and I feel maybe now somebody doing this kind of move, I don't really know if would work out the same way again. But this is kind of also where all the topics that we've been talking about come together again, because on the one hand, there's also still need for review on the Taproot pull requests. That would be definitely also great help if we just can concentrate even more review effort on Taproot. I mean, it's a huge review and it's complicated, but still there's still the need for that. I think to also get more people like completely on board that this is ready now. Like everyone who even like thinks they could be competent enough to review Taproot should just review it, and even if they don't feel giving an UC at the end, just say, okay, I looked at this and I didn't find any problems. If you don't feel comfortable giving an UC, then just say, okay, at least I've taken a look at this, and but I don't know what I'm doing. If you feel insecure, and then also Signet. This is just recently, last 1 or 2 weeks. I think Taproot is now activated on Signet. Like Signet is not merged yet. It's not in Bitcoin Core, but it's very close. And AJ and Kalle have integrated it in the main Signet. There's still a little bit of discussion. I think if that's the right way to go, but I think this will be the first. This will be one of the ways that we can test Taproot as well in the wild as part of Signet. I think AJ recently tweeted like the first transaction that they've done, the first Taproot transaction on Signet.
Yeah. No, and actually speaking of that too, Poolin mining pool, they put Taproot in a Coinbase transaction last week too. So it seems like momentum's growing, and that makes a lot of logical sense. Like, prove that it works on testnet, then maybe we'll easily garner some more attention and momentum to getting activated.
Yeah.
Damn, we just covered a lot.
Yeah.
I've got to wrap up here soon, but it's been a pleasure catching up, dude. Thank you for all the work that you've done. That you continue to do, and thank you for coming here and educating this dumb podcaster.
Thank you very much for inviting me again. I'm hugely honored to be a return guest. It's crazy.
Oh, stop it! I mean, like I just said, I learn a lot from you, and I think the work that you're doing unsung hero. A lot of, not you alone, but there's a lot of developers that are unsung heroes doing grunt. I don't want to call it grunt work because I couldn't do it. But like under heralded work that many more people should be paying attention to. So before we wrap up, just to bring it full circle, like what advice or recommendations do you have from a dev funding perspective, a review perspective, and the future of Bitcoin?
I think maybe the one idea that I had that I haven't mentioned yet around funding and reviews is just that if that makes sense for you as somebody who funds Bitcoin developers, just pay attention to that the people you fund also do reviews. I think that we talked about this previously as well. I think it makes sense if people that write code also review code. So usually mostly grants have been given out more focused on something on the code that people were writing, and that's completely fine. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. But I think the grant givers should also sort of request a minimum of review work as well. If you are somebody who has the capacity to fund Bitcoin developers, maybe just pay attention to that. And look not just at people who write cool code, but also who review code and consider funding them as well.
How can we help you personally? Are you accepting sponsorships on GitHub?
No, that's I've seen that, but it's I'm a bit hesitant because it's a bit public for me. Like there's I don't like it that much that you like see publicly who has funded who and so on. It's it's a bit weird to me, but I should get something up on Bitcoin dev list. I don't know if you mentioned that in the podcast already in the previous episode. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean Matt Odell, my co-host of Rabbit Hole Recap, he's the one who created it.
Right. Yeah, he made that. Yeah, right. Yeah, cool.
In partnership with Dennis Ryman from the
from BTC Pay Server. Yeah, that's that's a really good initiative, and I just have to get my ass off the couch and put BTC Pay Server on there. I think so. Something I have to get done. And I'm not. The GitHub funding thing, I'm not sure about. I haven't taken a close look at it, but it feels a bit too public for me.
Popularity, yeah. Hey, to each their own. If there is any way that we can help here at TFTC, let me know. It's always a pleasure talking. I hope the next time that we meet on this podcast, we do it in person. We're able to
that would be awesome.
Cheers in person, right? So if I'm ever in Germany, if you're ever in the United States, let me know. We'll meet up.
I hope so.
Actually, two big countries. We could be in completely different parts of the country. If we're ever in the same city, we need to meet up.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, Fabian. It's been a pleasure. Keep crushing it, dude. It's really incredible to see what you've done in the years since we last recorded. So I'm very happy to see that you're not burnt out and you're more enthused than ever. It's very encouraging to me.
Thank you very much. Thanks again for having me.
All right. Anytime. That's all we got this week. Peace, love, freaks.